Hi, I'm Dylan Paris, and today I'm going to talk about why I bought an Ableton Push 2, this guy, in 2021. I believe the second Ableton Push came out in 2015, only a few short years after the original. The original Ableton Push was a co-creation between Akai and Ableton, and then the second one was Ableton's complete vision of what the product could be at that time. It saw some improvements over time with different software updates, such as the move to Ableton 10, and it will also see some continued improvements with Ableton 11 coming out this year. There's a lot of speculation that an Ableton Push 3 will be coming this year, 2021. That same speculation has existed many years because the gap between the first and the second was pretty short, and the second one has been out for quite a while. A lot of the speculation is about a standalone device that can run Ableton's built-in synths. And after a lot of consideration, I decided that buying a used Push 2 in 2021 made more sense for me personally in my workflow than waiting for a potential Push 3, which, if history continues, will launch around $800, which is what this launched at. And if it's a standalone device like the Maschine Plus, it could be anywhere from $1,000 to $1,400, as we've seen with devices like the Akai Force, which launched at $1,400, and the Maschine Plus, which is at $1,400. The Akai Force is now cheaper, but those are all still very expensive compared to the $540 I paid for this Push. This is not the first Push I've owned. I owned a used Gen 1 Push for a few years before the USB port failed, and then I started exploring different controllers. I have an original Arturia Keystep, Essential 49, Korg Nano Key Studio, and an Ovation Launchpad Pro Mark III. So why did I want a Push? Well, if you watch my channel, you might know that I've used devices such as the MC707, the Maschine Mark III. The MC707 is a standalone groove box. This means that it can produce sound independent of any other device. The Maschine Mark III, much like the Ableton Push 2, is a device that requires a computer and software to go hand in hand. The difference between the Maschine Mark III and the Ableton Push is pretty substantial, and there are some pros and cons between both. The biggest pro for Maschine is its integration with native instrument software. Pretty much everything I had in the Complete 12 Standard pack was pre-mapped and browsable in Maschine, and there were Maschine exclusive packs, drum kits, presets, etc. that were already there. Along with that, Arturia made NKS versions of most of the V collection, or all of the V collection, including Pigments, which isn't in the V collection. This means that you could also browse and control Arturia synths using the hardware parameters in Maschine. So on paper, it was a dream device, and I have gotten really good results with it. My biggest issue with it, and why I decided to get an Ableton Push, is that at the end of the day, no matter whether I make a song on iPad, MC707, Maschine, it's gonna end up in Ableton. And when it does, I start to realize where having something just Ableton native makes so much more sense for me as a producer. For example, I'm still in the process of learning how to get my stems out of the Maschine. I did it in last week's video, but it was kind of clunky, and in fact, I think I just bounced a single stereo output instead of getting the stems. Now that's my laziness. It's totally possible to get the stems out, get them into Ableton. The difference is that if I made that song with the Push, then I could have made it in scene mode, which is how I like producing. I could have recorded a performance of it on the Push into the arrangement mode, and I would have still had the raw MIDI data connected to the plugins I was using. So that's the big thing, is that if I make something with Push, I get a lot more flexibility in my final output and in my performance, and vice versa. If I make something in arrangement view and I finish it, I can then put it back into scene mode for performance down the line, if I can ever do live performances in the future when things open up again. So I mentioned there are pros and cons for both. The pro for the Push is, one, its extremely tight integration with Ableton, and I also prefer this 64 key layout compared to the pads, which I think are 16 pads on the Maschine Mark III. The Maschine Mark III makes up for some of that with its really phenomenal chord mode, especially its pre-created chord sets. They're kind of cheating, but they're beautiful, and I love them. And there's something I kind of wish was on the Push. They seem like something that could be added later, and they also seem like something I could create myself with a little bit of work using like chord presets or a Max for Live instrument, but I would need to learn how to do that and then do it. But that said, for just live noodling around, we're talking essentially about a 4x multiplier of available input. And if you use the scale modes that are available on the Push, especially in the fourth spew. I watched a video on how to play chords using that, and I'll link it below because it was really helpful. But having that kind of input control is really nice for the way I like to play stuff. I'm a producer who likes to manually input a lot of my data in real time. Broader terms, I like performing things live rather than programming them. It's not exactly a binary. Every now and then I'll use the sequencer, especially for drums on this. I actually do like how they set up the sequencer with the 16 velocities option and other cool, neat things like that. But in general, I like to play things into my machines, whether that be the MC707, the Maschine, iPad, or the Push. Because of that, having 4 times the input options means that I can have one hand down here playing lower octave and one hand up here playing higher octave at the same time. This allows me to give more dynamic and broad performances rather than only the 16 pads that I would have to go back and forth between different octaves. So for me, the biggest reason for buying the Push 2 in 2021 is the price felt right. Even if a Mark III comes out, I don't think the secondhand value of the Push 2 is gonna go much lower than 400, would be my guess. I'm not an expert, but I have bought and sold a lot of gear, which means that if the Push 3 came out tomorrow and I wanted to sell this, I would lose $140 immediately. That's not ideal, but that would also be a choice. I could just not sell this, keep using it depending on what improvements come, and be totally happy. The other thing is that if I wanted a Push 3 or even a brand new Push 2, for example, that would be $260 more than what I paid. So I feel pretty good about the value proposition of what I paid here. And I'm pretty sure that selling the Maschine Mark III, if I choose to do that, even at $100 loss of what I paid, would still net me more than what I paid for this. So it's break even in the transaction, and it's a total of $100 loss if I get $550 for the Maschine, which I think is pretty average on street price. So I've mentioned it kind of throughout the video. I'm pretty sure I'm gonna sell the Maschine Mark III and replace it with this. I'm still in the process of playing with all my gear, but even though this has some downsides, the biggest one being that unlike Maschine, all of my favorite apps, most of them are not pre-mapped to these faders. That's a little bit of a bummer, but it's counteracted by the fact that it's extremely simple to go into a device, open configure, and then specifically map some parameters very quickly to the knobs. And for the most part, I don't need every knob mapped. I just need the cutoff filter, the volume control, and the effects controls. Along with that, it's really easy to add additional devices similar to the Maschine. And so I can have a Native Instruments or an Arturia plugin, map it, and then have a Valhalla reverb or have one of the many Ableton effects. Along with that, I've started to learn the Ableton instruments, the analog and the operator and wavetable synths specifically, because I have this sweet version of Ableton. And those are actually pretty powerful. I agree with most of the internet that the presets for those synths are not extremely good, especially compared to the V Collection and Native Instruments presets. But the actual sounds you can generate if you apply different chorus, delay, reverb, and change the oscillators, those sounds are great. So when it comes down to it, I think for me, the Maschine Mark III is a faster machine. It is, no pun intended, it is a easier to use device in some ways, and it will get you immediate results quicker with really professional sounding sounds. I own Complete Standard, so I have those sounds in Ableton as well. I can access them, it's just a little slower to load them and pre-map them. The trade-off is I get all of my Ableton sounds as well. I get the flexibility of Ableton Scene View. I get the really, really nice benefit of recording whatever I perform in Scene View right into Ableton as MIDI data connected to those VSTs rather than as audio tracks exported from Maschine. You can load Maschine into Ableton. It's not going to get me the same kind of results I get from this. My understanding is it's doable, but it's not the same as using Maschine standalone or using a Push. So yeah, I'm leaning towards selling the Maschine. It's been a really cool device. I don't regret it at all. I might take a small loss on it if I sell it because I bought it new. But that being said, I think the Push 2 is really where it's at for me. And so I'm gonna make some more videos with the Push 2. I'm gonna show you some songs I've been working on and some like little performance snippets. If you're in the market for something like an MC707, a Maschine Mark III, an Ableton Push 2, it's really hard to go wrong. I didn't talk about the 707 a lot. I've really considered selling it multiple times. The biggest issue for me, and I brought this up before, is just that the polyphony limitations, because it's a standalone device, are pretty substantial. Every track is pre-configured to only allow 4-note polyphony, and you can add to one track, but doing so takes away from another. And this is voice polyphony. So the device says it has 128 voices, but many plugins and sounds use more than one voice per note. And so on the 707, because it's a standalone device, it's running everything off of a chip inside of it, it's really possible to hit the wall of what you can do. And I found this sounds like it's true with the Maschine Plus as well. These are not like my desktop, which is a Ryzen 2600 with 32 gigs of RAM, multiple SSDs, a GPU, which I don't think helps for music production, but it's in there. Like, I'm just saying my desktop is very powerful and relatively cheap. You could build the most important parts of my desktop for something like $600 probably. You would need a keyboard, a mouse, and a display, but the actual central computer part is probably $600. You get one of these for $550 average on Reverb or eBay or Facebook Marketplace, and you're paying less than an Akai Force or a Maschine Plus with a lot more power. I mean, obviously you'd have to buy Ableton as well. I think this only comes with Lite, so that might not be a super fair comparison, but Ableton in general I think is also not too expensive. I bought in as a student, but now I pay the normal upgrade prices. And I think having the flexibility of a computer is worth it. Now, I mentioned live performance in the future. That's where the 707 would probably pull out ahead as an ease of use device, because you could just take it anywhere and use it as you've been using it. Whereas with the Push, I'm probably gonna end up buying an M1 MacBook Pro. I'm waiting to see if they do a 14-inch model or what happens with the 16-inch model this year. The future of the M1 Max is really interesting. I've been extremely tempted to buy in, especially after my video last week about how I really think that iPad needs more professional apps and more stability. But I'm leaning towards buying a Apple M1 or an Apple Silicon laptop this year as more apps get updated to support ARM or at least just run well enough on Big Sur to be emulated via Rosetta 2. So yes, I bought an Ableton Push 2 in 2021. And I am loving it. I've used it for hours and hours and hours this week. After work, just making tracks, having a good time, loading up old Ableton tracks. Anything I made in scene view on the Launchpad Pro is gonna load on here, but I also have the synth parameters tweakable, which is really cool. And I have also owned a Push 2 before for a little bit. I ended up selling it because I wasn't really using it for what it was intended for. It's similar to this camera I use, where sometimes I'll buy a piece of gear, be like, it's okay, and then sell it, and then realize, oh, that was actually way better than I remember, and I want that back. So I bought this camera early last year, and I've used it since. It's amazing. I have a feeling I'm gonna hold on to this for a while, but like most of the tech I buy and sell, there's a chance you could play this clip back at me in half a year, and maybe I won't. Who knows? But I'm enjoying it a lot. Ableton's my favorite DAW, and it has been since 2011. So it's pretty great. Should you buy one? Don't buy it new. That would, in general, my recommendation is don't buy new gear. Don't buy new gear unless the people who make it have a really bad reputation for quality control, and then it's like, maybe just don't buy that gear anyway. Novation has extremely phenomenal, like 2 or 3 year warranties. I don't know what the warranty is on this. Probably not amazing. When my USB port failed on the Push 1, it was a shit show. I was just like, okay, I'm actually just gonna not worry about that and use other stuff. But fingers crossed the build on this is better. I also didn't talk about it too much, but it's just so beautiful. I know that beauty and aesthetics are subjective, but this is, in my opinion, the sexiest piece of music gear ever made. It's so clean and minimal, and just the angles, it's elegant even when it's off, and then even cooler when it's on. Also, I realized I bought this quick lock stand that I use in most of my videos with most of my gear because it was the dimensions of a Push 2, and so it perfectly fits it, unlike the Maschine Mark III and unlike the MC707. So that's also a plus. People often ask, what is this stand? It's a quick lock laptop stand. It goes in and out of stock on Amazon. Last time I looked, it was in stock. It's about $60. I have 2 of them. They're pretty great. Would recommend. Anyway, thank you for watching. I've got a new song coming out on the 19th of January 2021 called Balcony. It is a finished version of a song I started 2 weeks ago on the Launchpad Pro in Ableton. I added a couple more layers, mixed and mastered it, and uploaded it. I sent it to Spotify editorial playlist via DistroKid and artist profile on Spotify, so fingers crossed to get some traction. But something I'm doing this year is I'm going to try to finish more of the songs I make on this channel and then actually release them. Unlike last year where I made an album separately from the work I was doing on YouTube. I'm trying to kind of synergize it more. So hopefully you all enjoy Balcony when it comes out. I'll look forward to seeing you in the next video, probably making something with this. Okay.